David Cohen, CEO of Fluence, and this is Fluence Unfiltered. This is another installment of our series on federal cannabis legalization with Safira Galoob, the Executive Director of the National Cannabis Roundtable. In our last episode, we dove into the process of pushing legislation through Congress, but today I want to look at one of two very important bills, the SAFE Banking Act. As a member of the Executive Committee, I get asked a lot about what is safe and when's it going to pass, and because once it passes, cannabis is legal, right? And everything's going to be fine.
So the first thing is that when we talk about cannabis legislation at the federal level, let's think of two buckets. One is the legalization bucket. Cannabis is not legal federally, and because of that, we have lots of discrepancies between state law and federal law, and it creates a lot of problem, confusion, and fear, and opportunity loss for our industry and for our economy. The second bucket is the problems that are created because cannabis is not legal, and that is banking, because banks are required to only extend services to businesses that are conducting legal activity, and because cannabis is not legal, cannabis industry has very limited access to banking. It does have access to banking, and there are reasons, but it's maybe 80 banks in the U.S. for 35,000 cannabis businesses. Probably, it's hard to know exactly how many businesses are banked, but probably we're at a dearth of maybe 70% lack banking. We also, in that second bucket of what problems are created because cannabis is not legal, we have a tax problem, we have immigration problem, we have veterans access problems, and there are pieces of legislation that address that incremental reform versus legalization, which we refer to as comprehensive reform. So safe banking fits in the incremental reform. The Safe Banking Act is a very narrowly tailored piece of legislation that creates a safe harbor for depository institutions. So think about credit unions, state chartered banks, insurance companies have been included in the safe harbor, but it's what I call and my lawyers in the audience will love this, it's the solely because language. It says, hey, financial institution, solely because you extend services to a legally operated, regulated cannabis company, you are not otherwise in violation of federal law. You are not violating anti-money laundering laws. You are not violating know your customer laws. You may be violating federal law, it says to the financial institutions, for other reasons, but not solely because you're extending services. That's all it does. It's not a piece of legislation that changes legality. It does not extend access to the senior exchanges for institutional investment. Yeah. It is specifically a way to begin the process of leveling the playing field for cannabis industry stakeholders. Your question may then be like, well, it doesn't do very much, so why do we want it? I mean, that's what a lot of people ask me. Yeah. And we want it because it is the first pillar down towards cannabis reform in Congress. So, and we hear this in Congress, sometimes more progressive Democrats will say, well, SAFE helps big banks. Let me tell you, the cannabis industry is not a huge book of business for big banks. JP Morgan, Bank of America, we are a small industry relative to their other portfolio. Exactly. So them getting helped by us is just a misplaced, it's just a misplaced argument. The larger established multi-state operators have banking.
And I think correct me if I'm wrong, the correlation here is that, this belief by certain people that this is drugs and drugs come with crime. When you allow a bunch of businesses to open and you don't give them a place to put their money to write checks, that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
The public safety crisis and the mounting robberies, armed robberies, coordinated armed robberies in Washington, Oregon, California, I mean, if you see video of how individuals and will take opportunistic, basically it's crimes of opportunity. The fact that that the public safety problem is getting worse. The fact that we have social equity programs being introduced in new states that are coming online, and we are prioritizing the success of that. And the fact that the Safe Banking Act has passed 6 times out of the House. And we have, I mean, I think if it were put on the Senate floor today, I mean, we need 60 votes in the Senate. I think we have at least 66. We've got 15 Republicans who'd vote in favor. And I think, one of the things we have to get very realistic about is I always talk about, they say, what do you do in Washington? I go, well, I deal with politics, policies, but mostly I deal with personalities. And when you start to come upon the midterms, and we've got key members of Congress who have primaries coming up, I mean, on the scale of supportive versus not supportive, and I mentioned that the more progressive you get in your politics, the bigger the bill you want, and the more you want in it, and the more you're demanding if we don't get everything for everyone, then no one should get anything. And that's really a dynamic that is constantly in play.
On the next installment of our federal legalization series, we'll cover a bill that's making its way through Congress right now, the MORE Act. To be alerted when it goes live, be sure to subscribe to our channel. We'll see you then.